You are correct. It is time. So we are ready to resume the meeting, and we are going to move to the next item on our agenda, which is the Pledge of Allegiance.
We have an award winner in our midst on our counseling team. So we're going to maybe perhaps if you can come one up and Ms. Eck, and do the Pledge of Allegiance from right there. They can zoom on in. So we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Would you mind? We don't have a student here today, and we always pick someone who's either getting an award or acknowledged. Gives you another time to shine on the camera.
Oh, thank you.
So can you help us start the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yeah. And you'll be hearing more about her and from her later in the meeting.
Thank you so much. So the next item on our agenda is the motion to adopt the agenda. So looking for that motion now.
I move the board adopt the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Schumacher. Do we have a second? Mrs. Bowley seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, you've all heard the motion. We'll move to a vote.
And the vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, everyone. Next item on our agenda, school highlights.
All right, this is one of our favorite times. And at the end of the year, we take in any of our above and beyond award winners, and those winners are invited to the board meeting. And so we have a parent that received an above and beyond award nomination from Randolph Elementary. Can we give an applause, and I'll introduce him and tell a little bit about him, but can we give an applause to Mr. Ben Alfred? And come on up, Mr. Alfred. Congratulations. And I'll give him a certificate, but then I'll tell you a little bit about him. And Mr. Alfred, the certificate says Topeka Public Schools Certificate of Recognition for excellence, exceeding expectations, and for being the above and beyond award winner. And let me share with you what the nomination shared. There's a lot about Mr. Alfred, and we know that they may have questions and want to hear about you. So we'll turn the microphone over to you. He is the PTO president at Randolph, has been there for 2 years, a strong advocate for children. His child will attend one of the middle schools, and he can share more about that with you. He's connected in the community. And I had a K-State scarf on that I took off after I read that he is a KU professor in data analytics. So Dr. Kip, another data dude. In fact, your jackets almost match, almost. So another data dude. But the nomination also shared that in addition to being the PTO president, it says he brings boundless energy and commitment to enriching the school community. The principal shared that he will bring coffee and snacks, supports time and effort and energy. She took him to the foundation breakfast, and after going to the foundation breakfast, he joined the foundation board. So he's on the board for the Topeka Public Schools Foundation after that one breakfast because he wanted to do more in serving. Additionally, he is a tireless advocate. She shared in a success for the well-being of all students, from organizing engaging events to spearheading fundraising initiatives. She shared Mr. Alfred's impact has been tremendous, and he has gone above and beyond all year long and through his 2-year presidency. So again, let's give a warm thank you to Mr. Alfred. Now I'll turn the microphone over to him.
Thank you.
Board members, do you have questions for Mr. Alfred?
Mr. Alfred, thank you for the work that you do. And it sounds like you're committed to being on 2 501 related boards or committees. Yeah. And that's fantastic. We really do appreciate your hard work and dedication on behalf of the entire district. Any of my fellow board members have questions or comments for Mr. Alfred? Mrs. Bowley.
So what has inspired you to get so involved with Topeka Public Schools? Well, my son was a big reason, but it was, I started off as a room parent and then the weird years. And then as soon as they were over, I came in, started on the PTO, but I've always done community service and it's somebody has to do it and everyone just does a little part. And as long as somebody does something, then we all end up doing it together. And
Well,
yeah,
I
you're
live
doing your
in-
work and I'm doing work with you. So we're all
Yeah.
just a piece of the same puzzle.
I live in the neighborhood and you're kind of a legend. I've heard your name. So that's how far your outstretch is in your community because I have heard your name. So thank you for everything you do for Randolph and our school district. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Yep. I love Central Topeka and College Hill, the area. Yep.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our next recipient is Miss Emily Eck, and any recipients of an award this evening, the board likes to take a photo with you, so please hang around for just a moment. We are going to call her principal from Williams up, Mrs. Ritter, and I didn't know if Dr. Grimes wanted to make a comment because she's in the audience. She oversees counselors, and perhaps Dr. Grimes, would you like to come on up, share a little bit about this award and our counselors? As she comes up on the podium area, Mr. Williams, I don't know if we can lighten it up so you can see Dr. Grimes. And I'm going to move over, but it's a little dark in this space from what it normally is. Thank you so much for the close-up, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Grimes.
Emily, come on up. So Emily's only been with us for about 3 years now, right? And came from kind of a human service background. So was new to the school counseling world. And you just know we have those new counselors who come in, those counselors who are just going to light fires. And Emily is one of those. She won the Promise Award for the state, which means an emerging counselor, somebody who's going to do wonderful things, and she already has. She doesn't sit back and wait to be told what to do. She's always there, taking initiative, and Ms. Ritter will probably caveat to what all the other things that I know that she has done. She volunteered for our district crisis team, so on call if we have a need for that. Great collaborator. She's going to be one of our mentors this year for some of our new counselors coming in. And just whenever I say, hey, I need a volunteer for this, Emily's always almost the first people to volunteer. So, and just a wonderful, stable background that she has and has offered great advice to some of our new counselors. So I'm really proud of her and well deserving of the Promise Award.
Thank you. That was perfect. I would have said the same thing. There was no part of her that was a first year counselor. She came in like an expert and has been someone that we can lean on from the jump. She's our K2 counselor, so she works with the little bitties. And I mean, look at her, she's perfect for it. They love her. She's so kind, she's so patient, and she does a beautiful job with our families. She can communicate and explain things that they need, and just really is a tremendous advocate for our students in this district. So she is a massive blessing to Topeka Public Schools, and nobody is more deserving of this award than her, truly.
You're welcome. Eck, congratulations. A couple of questions for you. I'll turn it over
Okay.
to the board if you have some questions for Ms. Eck.
Fellow board members, questions, Mrs. Bowley.
So what did you find so different from the job you had before and then moving into working with elementary students and their families?
Yeah. So the position that I had before this, I was serving as part of a KSCE grant that we actually do have here, the mental health intervention team. And so I was working in a K-12 setting where I was connecting families and students with outside resources for different therapies or different mental health resources that they might need. And I was doing that while I was going to grad school. And so this was my first counseling job that I stepped into. And I think that gave me a lot of really great background information on how to collaborate, how to serve students, but also how to make connections with families and students to make sure that they are getting the resources that they need to be successful.
It sounds like it was a perfect lead-in to everything that you have to do to in a building that size.
Yes.
It's
yes.
a tremendous job. So we are so proud that you have been recognized by the state of Kansas
Yeah, I
as
love working
somebody
at
that's
Williams.
going to grow and turn into something very special.
Thank you so much.
We're lucky to have you. Thank you.
Mr. Munoz.
First off, again, congratulations. You know, there are a lot of schools, wonderful schools in our district, and there are a lot of schools who could use your talents. What made you choose Williams?
I interviewed with a couple of Topeka Public Schools when I was coming into the profession, and I chose Williams because it was a magnet school, and at the time, it was one of the buildings that had an additional counselor in it, and I was excited to have somebody to collaborate with. And when I was interviewing, I knew that I would be serving K2, and those are my people. So I knew that that would be a good fit too. But I was really drawn to the magnet portion of it and being able to serve students from across Topeka. Yeah.
Dr. Bonebreak.
With a 50% school turnover, what is Williams? That's sort of a typical 2 months turnover in 501 in schools. What's Williams' 2-month turnover? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Well, let's assume it's
You
50%.
say 2-month turnover. So they have, and Dr. Kip, correct me if I'm wrong, is it between 49 and 53% mobility rate?
But that's for the entire year.
For the entire year. So being able to say every
Okay.
month, that may be a bit of a challenge. It depends on what month. If it's beginning of the year, or the end of the year, it looks different. But between 49 and 53% for the entire year. Williams and a couple of other schools in the East Topeka area have that same mobility rate.
So you would lose contact with probably half your students.
We do have a population where we do see students move sometimes. I felt like though, throughout my 3 years that I've been able to build connections easily, but also I have watched so many students go from kindergarten and now this will be my first year that's going in at 3rd grade and they're still like, oh, that's Mrs. X, she's my favorite person. So I think that being able to build those connections, but also being able to communicate with families and keep in contact to watch them through their academic career.
Mrs. Stewart Campbell.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I just want to take this opportunity for all the millions of people watching our school board meeting tonight about how amazing Williams is. It's like, I feel like it's the secret, like that people don't even know about. So I talk about it whenever I can. It's a magnet, and I know it's not magnetizing like we want because I think people just don't know about it. But you know, your rainforest, Miss Ritter. Where'd she go? Miss Ritter. Yes, the desert. It's just an incredible school. And I just wish more people knew how great Williams is and would go there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Wanted to say that.
Ms. Eck, thank you so much for the work that you do on behalf of our district and at Williams. And we absolutely appreciate that you've chosen to come and work with us.
Thank you so much.
I believe that concludes the last award. 2 things we want to mention. One, she mentioned the MHIT grant, which is how she started, which has now become a recruitment pool for us. We volunteered some years ago under Dr. Grimes to be part of the mental health intervention grant with the state. We're one of the very first schools, I believe. We were the first district as we volunteered ourselves. And in that volunteering, it allows us to have additional mental health interventionists such as Ms. Eck traveling around to different schools. And that has been a rich pool. That has continued. That grant has been renewed every year. It's a possibility it won't be, and it has been. So it gives us that on top of our regular counselors, and we get great counselors as a result from that pool. The other thing we want to mention is that our Above and Beyond Award winner, his child is going to middle school, which means you'll be going to athletic games. And so our athletic director for the district is here this evening. We have, and he has so graciously offered for an athletic pass for 1 year. So you and your family won't have to pay for games as you go see if your child is in sports. Is your child in sports?
He's mostly in robotics, but
Okay, so there might be some extracurricular. Yeah, the things do change when you get to middle school, and or if there are things you want to start seeing as a family that you might not normally see. The pass for 1 year for our Above and Beyond winner for secondary events might come in handy. You'll be getting that at the beginning of next year from Dr. Gray. Again, we congratulate you, and we'd like to take a couple minutes for photos if we could, Mr. Tatum. All right. Mr. Alfred, if you can come in the middle.
So as we move forward with our agenda, I completely forgot to mention at the top of our meeting that we've lost a couple of members of the USD 501 family recently. And at this time, we would like to take a moment of silence to honor and remember these Topeka Public Schools, a student and a former student and a staff member, current staff member, who recently transitioned, and they are Miss Marion Dawson, who has been a current TPS staff since 2007 at McEachran Elementary. The other individual, one of our graduates, Miss Roxy Perez, who graduated from Highland Park High School in 2022. Please join us in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. We're ready to resume our agenda. The next item is public communications. We have no one that wants to address the board tonight. So that moves us on to the consent agenda. And I don't have it listed on here, but I am looking for a motion for business by consent.
And Mr. Tatum, if I may, I'm going to recuse myself because of potential conflict of interest.
Thank you, Dr. Schumacher.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the items of business by consent as presented and authorize the board president or superintendent to sign the special projects and purchasing contracts for and on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz. Do we have a second? Dr. Bonebreak seconds. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, you've heard the motion. Let's vote.
The vote is open. All votes are in and the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda looks like it's superintendent's report.
Thank you. The first item is a topic on cell phone conversation, cell phone discussion. The board, you all have asked to have this as a topic for discussion at this time of the year. So in front of you, you have a magazine article and several pieces of research. And so we'll leave some of this to you to have conversation about. We will start off with our school board attorney just reminding us what our policy currently has in it regarding cell phones. The article before you has, and I'll mention 4 pieces of information that might be helpful for your discussion. The article before you talks about the Yonder pouch, which we used in 2018-19, I believe, at both Highland Park after the show Undercover High and at Topeka West. We do have some pouches left. I took the liberty for you to check to see if we had grant money that would cover enough pouches for all of our high schools and middle schools. And we do have grant funds that could cover purchasing pouches for all of our high schools and middle schools if we selected to do that. The second piece of information that might be helpful for you is research that the attorney will give you related to what some other districts have done or are doing. The third piece, of course, is the policy. And the fourth and final item is that Ms. Watson from Highland Park, given she was there when the Yonder pouches were put in with Dr. Perry, she is online with us. And Mr. Buckendorf was not there during that time, but Dr. Perry and Ms. Watson were there, so she can give you her experience and opinion. And Mr. Dick, of course, was at Topeka West during that time. So he is here with us as that fourth piece of information. So we'll start it off with the attorney to give an update on our policy, and then we'll turn it over to the board for discussion and or questions of our leaders.
Good evening. Our current policy is under 2945, and it's called the Acceptable Use of Personal Electronic Communication Devices, i.e. cell phones. So our current policy recognizes that and allows the use of cell phones and possession of them. And the requirement applies both to our employees and to students. And the basic idea behind the policy is that and I'll read you the exact language. As long as possession does not interfere with the educational process or compromise the safety of staff and students or the security of the school, then both employees and students may possess a cellular telephone or electronic communication device. So the policy right now is flexible, but the bottom line is it is not to interfere with the educational process or compromise the safety of students and staff. Specifically for students, it goes on to say that cell phones and other electronic devices must remain off and out of sight in the classroom or during instructional time unless it is specifically authorized by the classroom teacher. So our current policy gives the decision of what happens in the classroom to the classroom teacher. The exceptions can be made in special circumstances with prior approval from the principal. You will also find that at some of our schools, the principal has made the decision and does not allow cell phones for students. So it is flexible to the extent that it cannot interfere with the instructional process in the classroom or compromise safety and security of students and staff. It does go on to say that students are permitted to use cell phones before and after the school day. The principal may confine the use of the cell phones to certain defined locations in each building. Students are allowed to use cell phones on school buses on the way to and from school. Goes on to say that possession of a cell phone is a privilege. There is case law. First of all, there's nothing in the Constitution that anyone has a right to possess a cell phone. So it's not a constitutional right. Case law that has come down has indicated and supported that it's a local district decision related to cell phones. But it does say that they may be forfeited by the student who fails to abide by the terms of the policy. So the current policy does have an enforcement mechanism that if a student fails to abide by it, then they're subject to the policy consequences, which many times the classroom teacher has already set that, or in certain cases, the building principal. Certain of our middle schools do not allow cell phones. Goes on to say that a staff member witnesses somebody violating the cell phone policy, they direct the student to turn in the cell phone off and put it out of sight. That's in our current policy. And then if a student fails to comply with the request, the incident will be reported to the principal, who will determine what disciplinary action would be appropriate under the circumstances. Goes on to say that certainly inappropriate use of a cell phone to take pictures of other students and post them could result in disciplinary action. So there are consequences listed in the current policy. Be happy to stand for any questions that anyone has.
Any questions?
And if there are no questions, we're going to bring up the survey from principals that you asked us to do regarding if they'd like to see the policy remain as is or adjusted in some fashion, and if there are any comments. I have not reviewed this in advance, so we'll all have an opportunity to learn a little. Thank you, Mr. Reiner, for bringing that up for us. So in the survey, you can see the question was, is the current cell phone policy sufficient? And 71% said yes, as we continue to go down to the rest of the survey. And we will send you this link so you can look at it this evening on your phone. So we'll forward you that while we're reading this off. In fact, my glasses are either fuzzy or I will need to open the link to read it from here. So let me quickly do that. Ms. Wallace, I'm sure you have that link open.
There we go. There we go.
All right, thank you. The next one is, should it be used different by elementary, middle, and high? And you can see the majority said yes in that regard, over 65%. But the big question, should it be banned? And the question on should it be banned for elementary, middle, and high, you can see the blue graph would be the yes, and the red would be no for each one of those. And we have approximately 40-something principals that responded. I believe that might be the last question other than comments. And you see the breakdown for principals as well in terms of the middle, about 20% of our middle and 20% of our high that responded, but many of our elementary.
Did you want to see the comments?
And I believe if there are comments there. again, we will send you this, but the policies, I think the thing that probably related to policies at middle need to be in the handbooks and need to be updated. And these are principals saying this. So whatever direction you give, again, as you look at these pieces, we'll forward you that. Since there are a number of comments, and again, I haven't read through these either, just for the purpose of those that are watching online, we'll just leave them up there for just a minute and scroll to the next ones, but we'll go ahead and send you that link. And we may still have other comments in the survey is still open at this time. Now, keeping in mind, you have Ms. Watson who used the pouches and Mr. Dick here representing secondary to speak further on the secondary, and if you like. Those are all the pieces we have to share, and we'll turn it over to the board.
Quick question, Dr. Anderson. When you said that this survey was still open?
Well, they knew that you wanted feedback tonight.
Okay. When was this survey administered?
This week at the beginning, somewhere at the beginning of the week.
Okay, so it's very recent data.
It's very recent data.
Okay.
It may have been Monday or Tuesday, perhaps. We give out a weekly kind of update to our principals. I think it was in the weekly news update for principals. And then they received a reminder on Wednesday that we'd like to have their feedback for tonight's meeting.
Okay.
So the 45 people would represent the people within that time.
That's a really good rate of return. So good.
Yes.
Dr. Bonebray.
Mr. President, what do these pouches do?
Mrs. Mrs. Watson, I think she's up top, and I'll turn it over to you on what the pouches do. Mr. Dick will come to the microphone as well and share how they work and what they do. Ms. Watson, do you want to speak to that at all?
Yes. So what happens is the students put the cell phone in the pouch, and then the pouch locks like with a magnet, and the only way to unlock the pouch is to use this big gigantic teacher magnet that unlocks the pouch. So usually the kids will put them in the pouch and then either lay them on their desk, or those like shoe holder things you put on your doors, or they'll put them in like pouches like that after they've put them in the yonder pouches. So they just keep them away locked so that the students can't access them.
And
Will
a picture
the phone
is,
still ring and buzz and beep?
can the phone be
Yes,
ringing and buzzing and beeping?
it could be if they didn't turn them off. Yes.
And a picture of the pouches are in that magazine article that someone's using now that we were using in 2018, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
2018. I'll turn it over to the board for any added questions. Mr. Dick, you want to add to that, or did you sufficiently?
Yeah,
Okay.
she pretty well covered that.
Dr. Schumacher.
Yeah, as part of technology committee, I know that when we met, it would have been maybe April, there was a committee that was formed, and I was just wondering if there was a report out from that committee.
So yes, and that included some high school students and some parents as well. And we walked away from that first meeting with a conversation around, and everyone, I think, came to consensus. Mr. Reinert was there, he can chime in, that looking at a scaffolded approach with something perhaps different at elementary and middle and high was most appropriate.
Can you clarify, is that more strict at elementary versus?
Correct, yeah. So the scaffolding or differentiating between the three levels was more strict, like turned off in book bags at elementary, with parents recognizing and principals recognizing the need for kids to have it after school or before school perhaps, but not in use at all or visible during the school day. The conversation was then at middle school in their lockers, and maybe during passing time, they could check a text message or that sort of thing, but they stay in their lockers. And then more leniency in how they're used instructionally at the high school level.
And at the middle school, do some of our schools currently having cell phones stay in lockers all day?
Correct.
As their policy?
That is what most of them have as their practice. I know there's some concern, and I think it was also mentioned in the comments, that sometimes the things that occur with cell phones occur outside of school, and then that's pulled into school, particularly at middle school.
So French, and I believe Robinson as well, they don't allow cell phones throughout the day other than it stays in the locker. And you now have the survey emailed to you if you want to glance at comments while you're having your conversation.
Mrs. Bowley.
It looks like our policy says that cell phones basically shouldn't be in the classroom if it interferes at all with academics. And we know that it does. I mean, there's an addiction piece to cell phones. So students are looking at it all the time. If it's on their body or in their hands. And so my concern is, and this is what I hear from teachers that speak to me, is that it's one of those things they don't want to take on their own plate, that they want the building administrators to say, this is our policy at school and this is what happens. And I know our teachers, a lot of times will say to me, I just can't take on that fight because it can take up almost a whole period to get a student to put a phone down. So that's where my concern is this good support for teachers and that there's a strong policy at school about how phones can be used and then have that education for our parents. Another thing that I've been looking into is a lot of research saying that the cell phones are very detrimental to middle school and mental health and self-image, more so than in high school. And so I have that concern as well as I see more and more research rolling out about the mental health and self-image at that particular very delicate time in students' lives. But I think our teachers just need help with this situation because it sounds like our policies back up basically a no cell phone use during class time unless the teacher requests them to get their phones out to use it for academics. And so I really like to see more support for our teachers as a stronger building policy that is rolled out for parents to understand. I guess that wasn't a question, sorry.
Mrs. Schmidt.
I'd just like to hear from Mr. Dick and Ms. Watson, since you guys have some experience with utilizing those in your buildings, what were your observations from that?
So I will say, when we get to large schools and large staffs, it is challenging to get everybody on the same page to do the same thing when they go to their classroom. So the intent when we did it at Topeka West was that everybody had a set of pouches in their classroom and the magnet to unlock them in their classroom so they could, when they entered the room, they put the phone in the pouch, locked it up, and then when they left, they unlocked it. They could have it during passing time, lunch, any of those times, but when they came into class, that started out well, but as it got on, pretty much if you walked in and you didn't see the phone when they came in the room, whether it's in the bag or in a pocket or something, most people got to the point where they were fine with that. Then I didn't want to have to, ask a kid, I don't see your phone, where is it? Get a pouch and put it in there. And just slowly over time, that just became more and more loose. It worked well, for quite a while. And lots of teachers were on it and did that the whole way. There were some that were, well, I don't see it, I don't hear it, then I don't care. I'm fine with it. And so there's some challenge to getting everybody to just on the same page, doing the same thing, the larger the group of people you have is. Kids seem to be, we heard positive things from some students where I got to engage in conversation during, with somebody sitting next to me. They weren't looking at their phone. They weren't paying attention to their phone. That we heard some positive things from students from that. On the other side, we had some people who, parents in particular, who weren't very happy about the idea that they couldn't get to their student during the day if they wanted to. by text or whatever. And so we did have a little more probably pushback from parents than we anticipated that we might. We thought there'd be some, but there's probably a little more than we initially anticipated as part of that.
And I
Ms.
would agree
Watson?
with Mr. Dick on all of that. It was split with our teachers. Some of them did not want to use the Yonder pouches, and then others did. And then along with that, the cell phone doubles up. So when they don't have their charger for their Chromebook and it's dead, or they don't have their Chromebook period, or their Chromebook's getting fixed, a lot of the times it doubled up as the second use of technology for the class. So it's just such a various differences between the teachers and what they've used them for, that I'm with Mr. Dick that not everyone agreed to want that same policy where they're just gone.
So it looks like what happened, Mr. Dick and Ms. Watson, the presence of the pouch, Yonder, is Yonder, 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 okay.
YONDR.
Oh, interesting. Okay, YONDR. The presence of the Yonder pouch essentially becomes, in behavioral terms, a negative reinforcement, in which the threat of getting the phones removed was enough to increase the desirable behavior over time. So, Mr. Dick, when you identify that you had to use the Yonder pouches to begin with, but over time, the kids started getting the message that, okay, I need to go ahead and put my phone away. And if my phone's put away, and I don't have access to it, which is what they want anyway, they're not going to come and physically take my phone and put it in the Yonder pouch. So I think that is something that we should factor into this decision. And if the Yonder pouches are serving an instructive purpose, which is to basically say, kids, if you can't control yourself, then we'll control you and your cell phone behavior with the Yonder pouch. And just wondering if how much weight do we need to give that in considering if we're going to use this, Mrs. Schmidt?
Well, that just takes me back to kind of what Sue said in that, and I think we've all gotten some emails on this, that the teachers want some type of, or some of the teachers want consistency across. So to me, if we're using the Yonder pouch in that respect, then I don't think we're doing any more than what we have in policy, because
Sure.
a teacher can say, I don't want to see him.
Yeah.
And I think from what I've read from a data perspective and just other districts that have done this, that we need to have something a little bit more consistent, whether it be at each building level or what that is, but so that teachers and instructors don't necessarily have to make that interpretation or be the bad guy in their room, because one teacher is, hey, we're okay, we're going to use them. And then another teacher's like, oh, nope, they're going to go away. And then that's the bad teacher. Don't take that person for any classes because they won't let you have your phone out.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
I don't think we want to get into that. We go back to, our mission is to engage students in the highest quality of learning. Are we doing that if their face is in a phone? Are they engageable at all if they're looking at their cell phones?
Yeah, that's a very astute and fair point. Mr. Munoz.
I took some time just to listen and to learn, right? Because we aren't in the classrooms. And so one of the things that I've heard from a number of high school teachers was that the Yonder packs aren't effective because sometimes students will bring a second phone. We all have old phones that are sort of just lying around, right? And so and that's, I mean, it's, I heard it from a couple different places. So how prevalent that is, we just don't know, right? But I think our students are creative. They are brilliant, right? So, so I think the intention behind the Yoder pack, I think is well, but in terms of effectiveness, I just don't know. And to Lisa and to Sue's point about the effectiveness, this is this is a major issue that is directly related to the retention of our staff and to the engagement of our students and their academic success. We do have to do something. And I think, and I'm not sure what that is, all of the teachers and some of the staff that I talked to didn't have an answer for us. So that's our job, right? We got to sort of think through this, try and figure out what's effective. And I agree that putting the onus on staff is we want to make staff and teachers work as easy as possible. So we want to support them in what they're doing, which is teaching. And so we'll have to think hard to figure out how do we do that in an effective way. So.
Dr. Boomberg.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'm wondering what the parents' objection to not having a cell phone was. They can always call a school for an emergency.
They want access to their student.
So they can interrupt algebra.
There is a lot of communication on a cell phone throughout a day between a student and a parent.
Why?
I don't know, but there is.
Yeah. I could speak to that. I've had my child text me in the middle of the day and then I responded. I'm like, no, what am I responding?
Mrs. Stewart Campbell,
Yeah.
did you have a comment?
Well, I've had my own children have texted me during the day and I'll write back to say, put your phone away. This can wait. This can wait. So parents are just gonna have to accept this, like stuff.
I wondered why our data plan.
Parental education, right?
Yeah.
Just call the school.
Yeah.
Even like if they have a dentist appointment, I know I could say, hey, come on out. Call the school.
Huh.
It's time for your dentist. Hey, can you please excuse my child at 1 o'clock? They do not need, parents do not need 24/7. Okay, the school day is not that long, but do not need access like that. It's disrupting education.
There's also a fear that if there's some type of a school shooting or something like that, they want to be able to, and we heard a lot of that at Topeka West. Like if something happens here, how do I get my kid if you've got their phone locked up?
The problem is then the cell phone lines all get busy, tied up. Nobody can communicate anything.
Well, and I
That's
can
been well
speak to that, there was an incident at Highland Park High School and the misinformation that comes out because, the kids that are texting don't have the whole picture. And so there were texts going out, it was flying through all the public neighborhood websites that this was going on, and it's not what was going on at all. And so then now law enforcement is having to take their attention to that and fighting that because they've got parents instead of doing what we need them to do. And the same goes for when, people get that information, then they're calling 911. So then the 911 operators are having to they're taken away from what their real job is to fight all this misinformation. And I just have to point out, school and families and communication all existed for hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years without these things. Like at one point in time, people had to get on a horse to go to the school to get a hold of their kid.
What?
So I don't think calling an office, it's just, we have been programmed to be an instantaneous society. We want fast food. We want fast information. We order something. We want it here right now. And I think COVID helped precipitate that. Everything came quick. Everything, we meet with people online. We want an answer right now. No, you don't have to research. I want you to respond. I know it's been an epidemic in work, that with the systems having chat. Now people, if you email and you don't get a response within a couple minutes, then you're chatting them, and it's disruptive. I can say as an employee, it's disruptive when I'm trying to have time blocked to do something and I've got people going, well, I sent you an email and you haven't responded. Okay, we sent it 5 minutes ago and I'll get to it, and we're adults. So imagine a kid and their frontal lobe isn't fully developed, having to respond to all this stuff. And if they can pay attention to their teacher or respond to their best friend, which is going to take priority? I mean, it's tough. It's tough, but I think
true.
it's something we have to look at.
Well, I
Doc-
had,
Dr. Schumacher.
okay,
Take that, Dr. Bumrick. I raised my hand.
yeah.
I agree with a lot of what's being said. There's a couple things we have to remember as we talk about this. So I do think with the changes in communication, our systems change. So if I were to call the school 20 years ago, the response may be different than if I was to call the school today. I hear from parents who try calling the office, and they never talk with anybody. So if we make their kids unreachable to them, then we do have to look at those other systems that are in place. There are also students that are dependent on the technology from a health perspective. So a lot of continuous glucose monitors now hook up to phones. And so our type 1 diabetics are relying on those phones to know what their blood sugars are. So I think there's nuances. Like Mr. Munoz said, I don't know what the right answer is. I do see it as a big problem, and it's almost, the technology committee, that scaffolding, I almost feel like the problem is flipped. Like I don't hear it being a problem in the elementary schools or the middle schools, or maybe a majority of the middle schools. But at least what we hear from teachers is the problem in the high schools. And even though we want to give them more control, our head librarian, Miss St. Clair, she had talked about during technology committee, part of our job is to teach them how to be able to do this someday, how to be able to sit at a board meeting and have my phone here, but be able to actively engage and listen, because we don't have yonder pouches at the front of the board office. I don't have a yonder pouch when I go to work each day, but I have to be able to manage that. And that should also be part of our job. So, it's definitely necessary, but it's a big ask. But I'm glad Mr. Munoz is going to figure it out.
No. What I will add to the conversation is, just trying to think here. It is an issue, not just in the high school, but in the middle schools. And from what little I've seen sporadically in our elementary schools, I mean, they're at an age where they just don't have that, right? So we don't hear about it. But even at 5th and 6th grade, they're beginning to be on programs like Roblox and other things, and messaging in ways that perhaps they shouldn't be. God, what was I going to say? Anyways, yeah. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, another problem.
Dr. Bumrick.
I had a high school freshman. I wondered why our data plan was used up and they're going to charge us another $50. Well, my son had 2,000 texts a month and used up our data. That's 70 a day. Well,
During school.
During school. I mean, come on. I'm just not in favor of cell phones in school.
I did remember what I was going to say. This is to your question, Dr. Bombrick, which is part of where we arrive, I hope, is that we don't come off as completely dismissing parents who want to have connection to their students, as was said by Dr. Schumacher, that there are some very pragmatic, real reasons why some parents need to have that. And so we should, wherever we arrive, it should be very clear that if you need to get a hold of your students, here is A, B, C ways that every parent has to be able to connect it in an emergency, but that more than likely cell phones may not be at all times one of those ways. So addressing what I'm saying is getting at the concerns of parents who have a very real, reason and concerns for being able to communicate, maybe just not as much as as conveniently as they are used to.
Okay. Mrs. Bowley.
My thought is, I don't think that we want to ban cell phones from our school. I think we want something that, as an expectation for every student and parent, like I'm going to use my grandson's school in particular. They can have their cell phone in their school bag on silence, and it stays there during class. They know it stays there during class, and they can look at it during passing, but then it goes back in a school bag as soon as they enter a classroom. And it's an expectation, and the majority of the students follow that expectation. But I think we would be wrong to say we're banning cell phones from our campuses. Because Dr. Schumacher makes a very good, statement that some of those are medically used. Some of those are, parents are trying to keep track of their students because their students need to take the responsibility to take care of their own health while they're at school. But I just think we have to really have firm expectations for our district, for all of our teachers and principals to use, that is uniform across the district. And I'm hoping that our committee can come up with some of those and that bring it to our board so that we can make, a vote yay or nay on those expectations. But when we're having this discussion, at least from me, I don't want to ban cell phones from the property of our public schools. I think that would be very complicated in so many ways that we can't even foresee.
Mrs. Boley, are you talking about at every level of the school district, so elementary, middle school, and at high school level?
Banning?
Yes. You're opposed to banning at every level?
At every level, because just like the elementary, when we're talking about students having to have cell phones at the beginning or ending of the day for like being picked up or for whatever that use is in elementary, which is about the only real legitimate use for them there, except for if they're medically connected to their parents with their cell phones. But yes, there are reasons to have the phones on our property. If we say we're banning it from our school properties, I think we're going way too far.
So
Thank you for the clarification.
if I may offer, President Tatum, perhaps the technology committee can offer some proposed language that would be a revision to what we have, at least, or as procedure, if not policy procedure, that might take into account all of what you shared in that, the restricting from seeing it visibly in the classroom, some language related to that cell phones, wouldn't be seen during the instructional day in the classroom. But they can craft a few options related to that topic based on what you're hearing and bring that back for discussion at the beginning of July. That allows for us to take into account the survey and read all the comments as well. And that language, again, based on what you've shared, which is pretty consistent, that you'd like to see something more firm that doesn't cause the teacher to be the person to have to intervene. You'd like for something that's across the board and consistent. So if we may, over these next 2 weeks, work with language through that technology committee and bring this back to the board and then have a second conversation in July. Is that okay, President Tatum?
I think that sounds completely reasonable. And I wanted to, as a corollary to what Mrs. Boley mentioned, because I largely agree with both Mrs. Boley and Dr. Schumacher's position. I learned at some point in my professional career as teaching at in higher education, if cell phones are the problem, it's not generally the phone itself that's the problem. The behavior of the student is what needs to be curbed or managed, which is what I think that I hear most folks on the school board saying. Having said that, what the technology committee would I would hope that they focus on is something that's going to be substantially different from the current policy, because we have a cell phone policy and we've been able to review it in preparation of this conversation, and the feedback that we're getting as board members from folks in the community is that the stipulations of the current policy aren't working, and that's what Mrs. Schmidt was getting at. So I think I'd like to hear some fresh ideas, whether it involves the yonder packs or not. I think coming up with some creative, innovative ideas to address this issue is important. But it can't be just a regurgitation of what we already have in a different form. Mrs. Schmidt.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, we want to be data driven on our decision, right? We don't want to be the Gestapo here and go, the board says this. You know, hopefully the technology committee, if they come forward with something, I know we in the policy committee have shared several articles back and forth, you know, that have some data about the improvements that are seen in districts. You know, by changing the policy, possibly making it more stringent. I don't know what their policies were prior, so I can't speak to that specifically. But, you know, they saw an improvement in engagement or increased in test scores or an increase in mental health or a decrease in mental health issues, increase in good overall mental health. So I think we want to take those into consideration as we craft policies. We don't want to just pull a rabbit out of the hat. We want it to be meaningful.
Yeah, sounds reasonable to me. Mrs. Stewart Campbell.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in. So I think a lot of really important things have been discussed and stated, and I agree with everything that everyone has said. This is really hard. It doesn't really get much tougher than this one, how to battle this. Talking about the word ban, yeah, let's definitely avoid the word ban. Did you all see? Did you see this? Read this article? Oh, you've got it too. Yeah, okay. So, right. So one of the pediatrician, Dr. Rich, he says, I think we should approach this not as a ban, but as an opportunity. Right? Use the term opportunity. I am definitely, though, of the position that, like what Gardner is doing, the silent in a way, like a firm zero tolerance, allowing like before and after school, during passing periods, during lunch, okay? And then with the exceptions, like medical reasons. I also wanted to say, I've heard this before that, oh, if the teacher's more engaging and the class is engaging, the student's gonna be less likely to be on their cell phone. I don't want anyone saying that anymore, because that puts so much pressure on the teacher. The teacher could be the most incredible teacher ever, and the student's just on their phone anyway. So I don't want to hear that anymore. Oh, if the teacher's doing her job, the student's not on the phone. And I think we need to be consistent across the board, whatever we do, with the like medical exceptions. And having said all that, I'm really curious what Ms. Watson would like to see. Like, if you could wave your magic wand, what would you ask for? And then same question to Mr. Dick.
I think that it was hit on the nail in discussing that we teach them to be responsible adults with it, because again, cell phones obviously aren't going away, period. And just being able to use them properly. So I know at the middle schools, there are a lot of middle schools that have banned, okay, we're not using the word banned, who have the opportunity of using it only during certain times. And it seems, from what I understand, to work a lot more. And I know once we get to high school, our students have other responsibilities, which I think tends to be a lot of the issue, is the jobs and the watching of siblings, etc. So it just a way to teach them how to keep things away unless it's absolutely necessary. But that's part of the issue, is the difference between what's absolutely necessary to them versus the staff members in the building.
Thank you. What about you, Mr. Dick, if you could wave the magic wand?
I would pretty well agree with Ms. Watson. You know, there's a time and a place for it, and I'm sure if we asked students and parents, there were people that would come up with perfectly legitimate reasons why they needed to look at their phone at this time, or they needed to get them for some reason. If they were away and not heard and seen in a classroom, I think that would be the ideal situation, not to ban them or take them away from kids permanently, but some way to get them to be responsible students in what they're doing with them. And that's just really hard to do.
The leadership,
it's like a training.
the
like a
leadership
reconditioning.
team members shared a couple of messages. One, Chief Cochran mentioned the Uvalde shooting, to his point that having those on the property in some way where parents know my child's accessible is helpful. The other comment that was mentioned was regarding smartwatches. Dr. Kipp mentioned that, to remember that people do have some personal devices that still have phones on them, even though your actual, large phone is put up. Having said that, we will follow your direction with all of the feedback that was shared, develop some possible alternative language, and bring that back in July after looking at the data and some of the research that you've been sharing in your own committees.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dick and Ms. Watson. We'll free you all up to enjoy your evening, and we'll turn this, unless you want to continue to stay on the board meeting, as we go into talking about the preliminary scores from CAP. Dr. Kipp's PowerPoint that is now pulled up, he'll be sharing, again, preliminary. So the actual scores will come out somewhere around, I think, October. So then we'll share, if there's no change, that the preliminary would then be the scores once they're out. But based on preliminary data, which we'll turn it over to Dr. Kipp to walk us through that. You asked us to focus as well on moving students out of level 1. So he's also highlighting what level 1 looks like. And Dr. Kipp, I'll turn it over to you.
Do you all need my cell phone while I do this? Or, no? Okay. Just out of sight, out of mind. All right.
But it has to be on.
Yes, it is. But I have my watch, so I can do, okay. All right, so yeah, like Dr. Anderson mentioned, let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's start with the next slide. Okay, orange bars are this current 2024 state assessment ELA. The blue bar is last year's ELA. And so at the bottom axis is just by grade level, 3rd through 10th, all the tested grades. And we have 7 of them. This year, we did particularly better in ELA. Traditionally, we're doing well and growing in math, and it was refreshing to kind of see some increases. I mean, out of the 7 tested grades, 5 of them grew. And so 4th grade obviously maintained, but it's good to see as a district, all those averages kind of incrementally getting into the right zone where we want it to be. So this is ELA. We'll jump over to mathematics. Math was somewhat of an opportunity this year, particularly elementary. There were some declines 3rd through 5th and 6th grade. But what was kind of unusual and noteworthy was 7th, 8th, and 10th had increases, and they haven't had increases for years. So all in all, 43% of our buildings had increases in math. Conversely, about 70% of our buildings had increases in ELA. So I'll stop for a second. Any questions on this is the 60,000 foot overview. We're going to dive into the school level stuff here in a sec. So we'll go ahead and move on.
And on grade level and above would be levels 2, 3, and 4.
I've got a question,
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Kipp. They all, both math and ELA. I'm pleased to see that we've made the gains that we have. They all seem to be, every single comparison between last year and this year does not seem to reach the level of statistical significance. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could argue that the declines aren't, like you said, statistically significant, and in really, we're talking 1 to 5% drops. I mean, I'd be really concerned if it was a double-digit drop,
or 1 to 5% gains.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, not to bring up the C word, COVID, but we are still trying to play catch up to some degree of these kids and getting them back on. I mean, I'm pretty impressed that we are getting these kids on grade level. Because it is going to take years to kind of catch up from all that pandemic loss.
If we can go back to literacy for a moment, in order to get more students into 2, you have to move them out of 1. So when you see on grade level or above and increases in the focus on literacy, teaching students how to read, that area, as we continue to have a focus in that area, we should see more students moving out of 1. So you should see more in 2 And then, students, of course, we want to move into 3 and 4. So what's one of the reasons why we've also asked Dr. Kipp to track how many are moving out of 1 as the focus that you mentioned last year, I believe, to bring that up in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. The state mandate is to move kids out of level 1 and also move kids up to proficient levels. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. One more. So what I did was combine, there's a lot of data here. We're not going to go through all of it, but this is every building in our district's movement out of level 1. So anywhere you see green, and it's a negative number because you want a reduction of level 1. But I do want to point out a couple of really promising areas. It's kind of being blocked there, but Highland Park Central not only moved kids out of level 1 in ELA, but also had it moved kids out of level 1 in mathematics. Another highlight would be Ross, Highland Park High School, and Topeka West. So it's refreshing to see some of our more east side schools, more challenging populations, starting to move the needle in getting kids out of level 1. There's two-pronged approach here: getting 3s and 4s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and moving those kids up to grade level, which is 2. And so there's a lot of green on there. There's lots of islands of excellence. And towards the end, we'll actually highlight some schools that outperformed the state this year again. Okay. So this is kind of a breakdown of basically level 1s and level 2 and above. So if we had to rank order them, Whitson would be kind of leading the charge in ELA. Whatever processes, systems they have in place are working really well, to the point where 75% of their kids are on or above grade level. And so you can kind of see blue bars are good. Orange bars are their level 1. And I mentioned Ross. Their orange bar below level 1 was a lot worse the previous year than this year. So, small gains, that's really what we're trying to focus on, growth. As we go to mathematics, I do want to point out actually a couple buildings. If you look at the 3rd best mathematics movement, it's Lowman Hill. I know they kind of did some different interventions and different approaches because pretty much in January, we kind of have a good prediction of how kids are going to do on the state assessments through our local MAP testing. MAP actually provides a predictor of how kids will do. And so the schools have this set of data that they can use to build intervention groups, targeting, identifying gaps in learning, whether it's math, ELA, reading. And so some schools did a really good job of implementing that intervention with fidelity. And so obviously you see the mixed schools, McEachern, but I always love to see a Lowman Hill or a Ross or a Scott or State Street up in this zone as well. So next slide, please. As we take a look at secondary, as I mentioned, Topeka West, they did something pretty astounding this year. They not only increased kids on grade level, but they also had a significant movement out of level 1. French, Landon, Topeka High also had some great movement. Okay, let's go to the next one. Again, French, Landon, Topeka West, yes, Jardine, Chase, some really good movement. We're looking for incremental growth, and there's still some opportunities at some of the other alternative schools, which some of these kids are taking the state assessments and they haven't even taken algebra, for example. So they're being exposed to some content they may not have actually seen in the classroom. Okay, final slide. Oh, college prep, of course. We always like to kind of keep a pulse on college prep and those kids there. The blue is college prep. Now, as you can see on that left bar chart there. We want low numbers in level 1 for college prep, low numbers in level 2, but as you can see, levels 3 and 4 for college prep almost double the rates of what the state of Kansas is operating at in language arts. Conversely, on the math side, pretty much all the kids, I think there was one kid that got a level 2 in math, and that was a high level 2, just right on the cusp of the 300 cut score. And so we have almost 90-something% in 3s and 4s in mathematics. So they have a really robust program over there. And so some of these are the highlights. I did want to point out again, like I do every year, those pockets that outperform the state. Again, McClure's 5th grade ELA, McCarter's 5th grade ELA, 5th grade math, 5th grade science. All of these outperform the state. McEachran, Vic Williams went out with a bang with 5th grade math and 5th grade science. And Whitson, they have an incredible model there. Their 3rd grade math, ELA, 5th grade math, and 5th grade science all outperform the state. French, I believe this is their 3rd year outperforming the state in mathematics in 8th grade. And finally, college prep, they outperform the state both in ELA and math. Now, on the right side is what I talked about before with movement out of level 1. Highland Park Central had growth onto grade level out of level 1 from ELA and math. Jardine Elementary had growth in ELA. Lowman Hill, mathematics. Ross, ELA and mathematics. State Street, ELA and mathematics. Whitson, ELA and math. Robinson's ELA movement out of level 1 was greater than 5%. Highland Park High, ELA and math. And then finally, Topeka West's ELA and math. So we're really happy with some of this growth. You know, we do still have some opportunities to get kids up in those 2, 3s, and 4s categories, but I'm really optimistic that if we can continue with this trend, we're going to see some great things in the next few years.
And I don't know, as Miss says, Watson's still on. She might not still be on. She was excited. Oh, she's still on. Since we're talking about CAP, you want to make any comments about your CAP? And we'll go back to where we just were on the slide. It says summer programs now, but as we go back to that one space. And I mentioned Miss Watson because, you know, Robinson, Highland Park High, these are places that haven't had growth. But under the leadership that they have now, the growth is significant and just that there is growth. But Ms. Watson, I'll leave it to you to share your comments and your thoughts about your own performance. Again, long way to go, but what are your thoughts thus far?
Yeah, it's really exciting because it has definitely been a while, especially in our math area, that we've improved. So I know that our teachers have been, you know, working really, really hard, building relationships with kids and really getting them to be structured so that when they go to teach them that everything is ready to go and they're learning. So they're putting in a lot of work.
Ms. Watson said, Dr. Anderson, I don't know when the last time was we had growth. This is the first time, I think. So she was excited, similarly.
Definitely.
Definitely. I know Mr. Dick is gone, but the English growth, the growth at Topeka High, he was sharing in terms of trying to move students out. So some exciting momentum. Highland Park Central, I have to say, wins the banner of the double-digit growth.
Yeah.
That was significant, like 20%, I believe. It was significant.
Yeah, if you add the two together. Yeah, it's and they were just, I mean, really intentional about leveraging their data. I mean, we have a crystal ball in January. And if a leader can leverage that data to build quality and interventions with fidelity between that and April, they built some great cycles where they would have kids come in for 2 weeks of intervention, rotate them out when they felt like they had filled the gaps and mastered some of the standards, move in another set of kids. So it wasn't like just teaching, you know, to the top or teaching to the bottom. They rotated all the ones that had deficits. And I think that model should be replicated throughout, and whatever Whitson's secret sauce is, whatever we can do to kind of get that.
And then Scott's fifth grade was incredibly high. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that was an interesting, Scott's fifth grade, I believe, was 30% proficient, and that's just levels 3s and 4s. I didn't even
The
count
top,
level 2.
the highest
Yeah.
level.
So, and that goes back to the whole dual language model, and learning another language fires up other neuron and, aspects of cognitive growth that obviously bleed into other areas.
So the growth at Scott, she was excited about that. And I think Mr. Munoz, you might have sent me a picture of their award ceremony. You got a chance to sit there in the assembly and hear the parents, the fifth grade parents, being told about this incredible growth at Scott at the top tier levels. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. So we're excited about that. So remember that, and we do give an assessment. We started requiring everyone take that in December. When we first started giving that assessment, we made it very optional, but we moved the option because it does give a very strong predictive score, and the score is almost exactly the score now. But if they intervene, when they get the scores back in January, they can make some large gains in some of our young people. So we're excited. We congratulate those principals on the preliminary data. You will see those principals in September when they get the challenge awards, and somewhere between September and October, we'll have the final data, and we'll just let you know if the data stayed the same. Thank you, Dr. Kipp.
Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about if you could speak to, given that this is just preliminary, can you speak to sort of the dialogue that happens between buildings in terms of some of the success and sort of strategies as going into a new year? And also maybe, I think it's about building culture and highlighting a lot of the success which you've just sort of brought to our attention. And so I think anything we can do to sort of highlight both of these boxes of success is important. So
Yeah, that's a great point.
Dr. Kipp, Ms. Walls, Ms. Sharp.
I can speak from a data point of view. We've been having reflective conversations with these principals at the end of the year. We're going over some of this CAP stuff before, the gap of August comes. And so we've had some really good conversations with sharing some of these best practices, like, for example, involving the students in setting their own goals. That intrinsic motivation, that competitiveness that kids have, like, okay, what do I need to do to get to this level? This is where you're at now. And I think that has more of an impact of saying, you need to meet this goal. There are individualized goals that are created in our MAP assessment. That's a best practice. But yeah, absolutely. They are mentoring each other and talking about test-taking strategies. Like there's some tests from the CAP retired items that they're using as teaching tools. So like pull it up on the screen. Boy, that question is very difficult. Look at the distractors. What would you pick? So they're doing item analysis, and most kids, those distractors are very difficult sometimes. Even trickery with what's the main idea of this paragraph? What's the central idea? I mean, to us, we can kind of delineate what they mean, but to a kid, that one word might throw them off. So test-taking strategies are important. Goal setting with the students, sharing intervention calendars. Like, how do you do this? There's a lot of logistics of building interventions. Do you have the resources in your building, the coaches? Yeah.
So yes, some of the conversations that Mrs. Sharp and I have had with some of the principals are about the model for intervention, the time, what time do they have in their schedule? Are they using it and maximizing it with walk to intervention? Do they have students in the right resources? We've spent a lot of time in the last few years purchasing resources for students who are struggling multiple grades below level. So how are we using those resources? Do people who are implementing them have the training that they need, and really getting our staff who are experts at those out to provide that professional development?
And principals have started collaborating by strand. So the East Side feeders are starting to share what's working and what are they doing that's different. And then Dr. Gardner has Highland Park High students coming over to his students and tutoring and mentoring. So that concept of we're all one collective community, building collective capacity is also building some momentum and pride, community pride. Thank you.
Mrs. Boley.
First off, thank you, Dr. Anderson, for hearing your board's voice about trying to move this difficult level one. This is hard lifting. And I appreciate all the teachers and principals and everybody's putting that work in. But for you hearing our voice that we really wanted to move those students out of level one, we're starting to see progress. So we just really thank everybody for that. Mrs. Wallace, I'm coming at you with a difficult question or a question that's in my head. So I'm looking at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade scores in math. And as it was about 3 years ago, we changed our math curriculum, I think. Was it a little longer than that?
It's been a little bit longer, yes.
About 4 or 5 years. And so I'm seeing a drop there where we were having raises there. Why do you think that might be happening in math in the lower grades? I know COVID had some effect on that early base math for our students, but do you have any concerns with our math curriculum that we've chosen?
So we are seeing those students who were in K-1, 2 at that time are now in 3, 4, 5. And so we've actually had increases the last couple of years in math. So this is the first decrease. We did not change our resource. We did not change our curriculum design map significantly in any way. So actually the curriculum and assessment team is meeting next week. I've had some preliminary conversations with Mrs. Kimsey, and that is actually a question that we're going to kind of dig into about what happened.
Thank you for doing that. It's just in the back of my mind. So thank you for.
And I think it's
answering
the
that.
members of the CNA team and the teachers who can give us that insight probably better than anybody.
And so when you were talking about the crystal ball earlier, the actual name for that is our MAP testing, right?
Yes, yes. And it has built-in
Just for
predictions.
everybody on the board is that it's an assessment that it's been lining up really well with our state assessments.
It's a lot more rigorous than Scantron was. And I believe it aligns better with the state assessment. You know, teachers will give feedback that, you know, it's a difficult, there's a lot of depth of knowledge. You know, it's not just computational math. This is like, maybe not even, they don't even want the answer in the question, just how did you get to this process and things like that. And so, yeah, we give it the MAP testing in fall, winter, and spring. And so MAP has some built-in growth targets that they should achieve between fall and winter. So we're almost benchmarking even before we get to the actual state assessment. And so, yeah, we have those tools there. It's just the intervention and finding those gaps. But MAP's been a great resource for us.
And that the building leaders are breaking that down into the state standards that are on the state assessments or might be on the state assessments that are showing up in the maps, that's where they're building their interventions. My student here scored low on these particular standards, so they're rotating into.
Well, one of the challenges is on the Kansas state assessment, they don't break it down standard by standard. Many states do, like the student did not pass this standard, this standard. They have a thing called a cluster of standards. So you can kind of get an idea, you know, because some standards overlap with each other. Some are more discrete, some repeat and repeat. So we did do a strand cluster analysis for every building. So every building knows, you know, are your kids struggling with place value? Are they struggling with numbers and operations? So we can get down to that granular level. And so we're not wasting time on things that they already really know. I mean, and that's what I love about MAP. It'll drill down all the way to the student level to the exact areas or clusters they're struggling with. Yeah.
This is heavy lifting.
I don't do it.
I
It's the
don't think
teachers.
people understand what a heavy lift it is for this state assessment and changing these students out of levels. So thank you. Thank you all for putting in that work to help everybody understand what we need to do to engage and prepare and inspire our kids. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Dr. Bonebreak.
I have often wondered where the state gets where our students should be at what level. Where do they get those recommendations? Well, they say national. Well, where do they get their standards? If we're compared to international standards, we're going to lose.
Well, our cut scores were developed years ago and by teams of teachers that came into the state, and they had, I believe Ms. De La Cruz was part of that, one of our own. And they kind of developed they wanted a really rigorous state assessment. Okay. And so these cut scores were developed, using psychometrics and to be very rigorous. I mean, you can tell it's rigorous when only 28% of 10th graders in the whole state pass this assessment.
How'd they do 30 years ago?
Different standards, different cuts. 30 years ago, I was still in high school.
So
I'm not
where
sure.
where did they get their standards now?
Well, it's Common Core standards.
And where did they get the Common Core standards?
The Common Core standards were developed by organizations of teachers. And I would tell you that the Kansas standards are grounded in the Common Core, but they've made pretty significant adjustments or changes to them as well, based on the needs of Kansas students and the trends that they see in our data.
Except if they're using European, Scandinavian, or Far Eastern standards as part of their numbers, there's no way we can compete or make the standard. They've got 3 more months of school.
I think that's a good segue into summer school and the extended school year at Ross.
And I believe summer school will actually come up in July, but we know that you might be wondering how things have gone. So just as a general statement, more students showed up than what we anticipated showing up. So it's excellent. Dr. Gardner will join us in July. We want to give you that quick update and let you know that summer is off and going under Dr. Mejia, who's not here this evening, but Mrs. Walsh wanted to, I told her just to make sure that we know that this first week has been wonderful. And we'll be bringing this back again in July with a more robust report with those team members, particularly Dr. Gardner and Mrs. Gorsuch de Moranville, who are both doing the year-round school or extended year as the pilot. And we'll turn it over to you, President Tatum.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. The next item on our agenda is a discussion item. Possible change in the date for the 2nd June board meeting. And Dr. Anderson, do you have something for us on that?
Yes, and Ms. Robbins, feel free to jump in if you need to, but Mr. Minke does need us to have a board meeting at the very end of June to pay the bills and just approve personnel report. We were going to talk about cell phones, but because of the energy around discussing that earlier, we moved our cell phone conversation up to today. Therefore, we are just asking for you to have a board meeting on the 26th, a noon meeting. We need 4 people to join by Zoom at least, just to pay the bills and approve the personnel report. We don't have a topic at that time, so we'd like to remove the 20th meeting and have the meeting on the 26th. If 4 members at least, if not all of you, can join by Zoom to just pay the bills and approve the personnel report. Any questions that you have for us in that regard?
So if I'm understanding, Dr. Anderson, that meeting that we are proposing will not be an in-person meeting. We will plan to meet together to hold the meeting on Zoom.
On Zoom at noon, yes, sir. And So we can give our intent to exceed the revenue neutral, but also pay the bills. That's it, a noon meeting. For
Okay.
really two topics, personnel report and the other item I just mentioned.
Okay. Any questions or thoughts on that from, I've got a question. Normally when we have a discussion item, we don't act on it until the following board meeting, but this particular discussion item is different because we'll need some action on this tonight, correct?
In regards to just changing the board meeting?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes, we're just asking you to take action on that. And normally your discussion items are things like cell phones and other
Right.
kinds of things. This one was one when we learned there'd be a third board meeting and we moved up cell phones. Rather than a discussion, we're really just asking you to take action to change the meeting since that's something that's come up rather recently.
Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. What's that, Dr. Bonebrick?
So do they just need to make a motion to remove the meeting on
You ready
June
for that?
20th? Mrs.
They have the
Okay.
motion there,
Yep.
and they agree.
So yeah, at this point, if there are no other questions or comments, we would entertain a motion to move the board date as discussed.
I move to approve changing the second June meeting from June 20th, 2024 at 5:30 PM to June 26th, 2024 at noon.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Schumacher. Do we have a second? Mrs. Schmidt? Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, you've all heard the motion. We'll go to a vote.
The vote is open. Thank you. All votes are in and the motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thanks so much. Now we are ready for board member comments. And because I like to change things up, I'm going to go ahead and start. I don't have much, but I'll start and then pass it down to my left and we'll go on down. And I just like to say that in terms of committee reports, I have had policy committee since we met last, and the cell phone issue that we are discussing tonight, have been discussing tonight, is a outgrowth of the work and the deliberation that the policy committee has put into that particular issue. In addition to, other correspondence that board members may have received from members of the public. So there's some other policies that need some revising and retooling, and this committee will continue to work on those and bring them forward as the committee makes progress. The only other thing that I wanted to say, and I have a cheat sheet because I can't remember all of this, but did want to give some kudos to a TPS alum, Nija Kennedy. She is the USA Softball's 2024 Collegiate Player of the Year and Softball America's Pitcher of the Year. That is incredible. And she is representing Topeka Public Schools. So congratulations to her. We are very proud of her. I think it's just been a year or two since she graduated and went on to 2 years. 2 years. Wow, time flies. She's a sophomore now. Okay, thank you, Dr. Bonebrick. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but we certainly wish her well, and we will continue to watch her career with great interest. And that's all I have. So I'll pass it to Dr. Schumacher next.
I haven't had any committees since we last met, and I was out of state for a good portion of the time, so I really don't have anything for tonight.
Mr. Munoz.
We had a policy committee. I think Mr. Tatum already shared. We have some revisions on some things that'll be forthcoming in the future. And no updates other than my kids are enjoying summer school. Thanks to all the staff who are putting that together.
Ms. Schmidt.
I am the third member of policy committee. That's been thoroughly covered. Our health committee doesn't meet again until next Monday, so no updates there. Just appreciate all the staff that are giving up time this summer to make sure that our kids either gain back some learning loss maybe throughout the year or just get them ahead for the next year. I always took summer school just to get ahead, and I love that. So I appreciate their time and forfeiting their summer vacation.
Mrs. Bowley.
Thank you, Mr. President. So it was very exciting to have Dr. Hattie here for PD. People who aren't in education may not understand he's kind of a really important guru and has really made some big changes in our instruction in our district. We've been working with him for a while. And we had, somebody will maybe need to help me here, but we opened that up to other districts. How many people did we have enroll in that outside of our own staff?
69.
69 that came to be a part of that. So it was pretty exciting. We have some other exciting things happening for our teachers this summer. It's very, very fun to see us becoming that PD hub. Simone from College Prep came over to help with the kickoff at Juneteenth and did such a nice job speaking in front of everybody. As you know, that's one of the requirements of College Prep, and she did us so proud. Dr. Anderson did us very proud too. She had a very moving address to the audience about moving forward and continuing to make progress. Topeka West and Topeka High both had candidates that were runner-ups for the Juneteenth Queen, and so that was very fun. It was a sad week sad last 2 weeks. We want to give our condolences to Mr. Gowan as a board, I'm sure, and tell him how you have been in our thoughts and prayers. So you are with us. I had a lot of fun at the golf tournament today. Topeka Public Schools was very well represented. Dr. Anderson had bought a sponsorship hole. Mr. Robbins did a sponsorship hole. Mr. Cochran, who's already left, he played in the tournament. There was a lot of staff there playing, and we just represented very well and hopefully made some good money for those scholarships. Also, we have a almost birthday girl in the room. Dr. Anderson has a birthday, I think, this Monday. So don't forget to send out birthday wishes. Going to be 39. I want to also say I had a miraculous putt that I should have never made. It was really long. It was on the fringe of the green and it went right in. It made me look like I was part of the team. It was so exciting. And our team took second in the second flight, which I don't quite understand what that means, but I won actual money. I had some good golfers on my team that pulled me through. So I had a really great time. I hope some of you might think about doing that again. I almost had Dr. Bonebreak as a teammate, so maybe next year. Maybe next year. But it was a great time, and I hope that we did some really good things for our school foundation.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Are you ready, Ms. Stewart Campbell, or should we go to Dr. Bonebreak?
Go to Dr. Bonebreak.
Okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Bonebreak.
Well, the great Sanhedrin met. Mrs. Wallace, Mrs. Sharp, and I, before dinner time, to decide how can we improve the special education, improve the disruption in classes. And it kind of came down to, we have a lot of social and financial poverty in the district. And since the legislature isn't much interested in helping out, we've got to make sacrifices. Like, for example, half the kids in several schools aren't with the same school. they're gonna have some learning loss transferring to schools that are, yeah, it's just goes ad infinitum. So we made no great decision with the Sanhedrin. I'm sorry. Nothing will come on down from high until we get more money.
Okay. Mrs. Stewart Campbell.
Okay, so I do have something big to share. And due to a change in my position in the migrant education program, which will require me to provide services to Topeka 501 students, I will no longer be able to serve on the school board because of just, it's a conflict. So on this esteemed school board, so tonight is my last night. No, I know. So I am thrilled that I get to continue to serve this incredible district by supporting our migrant students. So I'm going to be out and about. I'm going to be in schools. I'm going to be working a lot with our students. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm just not going to be sitting here. I'm going to be out there. So I'm going to be even more involved in a sense. So being a board member, let's see, what more do I want to say? Oh, just a lot. It's been an incredible honor to serve with you all and district administration and Dr. Whiteman and Mr. Gowan and everyone for these, Miss Lister, everyone these past 4.5 years. It's just been really an incredible, one of the biggest honors really of my life, not to get too cheesy, but it's true. And it's just taught me a lot about this district. Our district is so special. And you've all heard me say before that when we were looking for a house, it had to be in 501. Yeah, this was before I had kids. I'm like, it had only 501 for my kids. And this district is really, really special. And I've learned a lot about it serving on the board. And I've also got to meet so many incredible educators. So with this knowledge that I carry from serving on the board and meeting all these educators, it's going to make me even more effective as I go out there to support migrant students. And well, let's see, I'll come visit and I'll see you in the schools. And who knows, maybe I'll run again and after I retire in 2031 and maybe you'll be sitting by my side. And but then maybe I'll be sitting here and some of you will still be on this board. I hope so. And also I remember Dr. Anderson, I remember you saying once that former board members could present their diploma to their child. And I really hope I can do that.
Next year.
Yes. Yeah, because my son will be graduating next year and then my daughter 2 years after that. So see you on the stage next
right.
May,
Yeah.
at least for a little bit. Okay. All right. I expect some good quips. Okay. And
so Mrs. Stewart Campbell, we will miss you. You have been a very engaged and engaging partner in this educational process. And you are someone that I have certainly gotten very close to. And I'm gonna miss spending time with you regularly in these situations when we work shoulder to shoulder on a great deal of things. But I think I speak for all of us when I say we wish you well. One door is closing and another one is opening. Mm-hmm. And we will certainly be available, be where we have been in case you need to call on us. Oh, yeah. And we know that you will also continue in the work moving forward, you will continue to be an advocate and a supporter
Mhm.
for the district and the school board both.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
all the best to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I got all your numbers.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
and I know how to make stickers now. Actually, I got that idea from you, Dr. Schumacher. So I'll definitely, we're going to stay in touch.
So the board accepts your resignation. Mrs. Whiteman, do we need an official vote, or do we just need a consensus on?
Yeah. You certainly can do consensus, and it's important though that when the resignation is effective and based on the Stuart Campbell response, I would anticipate that it is effective immediately.
Effective
Therefore,
immediately.
Kansas law requires that when a vacancy exists, then the board has to publish notice of the vacancy in a local newspaper.
Right.
And then wait 15 days after that, and then the board can discuss the process for filling the vacancy.
Okay.
At a later date.
Thank you for the reminder. So, Mrs. Lister, I understand that you may actually have a template from previous. Yeah. If we're able to dust that off and utilize that, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much. Anything else that's needed on that front, Mrs. Whiteman?
I wanted to say no, Your Honor.
Well, I do have a gavel.
Right, not at this time.
Okay,
Mr.
okay,
President.
okay. Thank you. Okay, and so with that, that brings us to the end of this board meeting. So at this point, we are looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move the meeting adjourned.
Okay. Do I have a second for that? Mrs. Bowley seconds. Any discussion? Okay, let's have a vote. Show of hands. Well. Oh, the motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned.